Great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Museum Dialogue Session 8 with Pari. I'm Purnima Sardana. I'm founder of Museums of Hope. It's a humble initiative to rethink museums and cultural resources for well-being. And Museum Dialogues is a series where we meet experts who work on different aspects of well-being through museums and cultural resources, ranging from health to social impact, inclusion, diversity, ethics, uh, also climate change. So in this context, we've invited People's Archive of Rural India to be able to learn from them. And we have with us Priti, David, and Smita Khator. Um, I'll just give a quick introduction to Pari before introducing our speakers for today. The People's Archive of Rural India is both an online living journal and an archive. It generates and hosts reporting on the countryside that is current and contemporary, while also creating a database of already published stories, reports, videos, and audios from other sources. All of Pari's content comes under Creative Commons and the site is free to access. Anyone can contribute to Pari as long as the contribution meets the standards of this site and falls within their mandate, the everyday lives of everyday people. Many worlds, one website. Along with audio, visual, text resources, People's Archive of Rural India also offers support in education and learning through teaching and research materials and relationships with such communities. Public access to People's Archive of Rural India is free. The site is run by Counter Media Trust. We have with us today Priti David. Priti is a journalist, editor, and teacher. She reports for the People's Archive of Rural India on Adivasis, health, education, and livelihoods. She began her career in 1989 with the Economic Times, has anchored and reported for CNBC, ABNI, and India Business Report on BBC World as bureau chief for TV18. She taught high school from 2005 to 2015 and as editor at People's Archive of Rural India Education, interacts with urban schools and colleges across India, getting teachers and students to engage, explore, and empathize with people and issues in rural India. She works with them to document rural issues and migrant lives as part of the course curriculum. Smita is the translations editor of People's Archive of Rural India. She manages the translation operations of 12 Indian languages in which the stories appear. She's based out of Kolkata. She anchors a network of translators and language editors spread across India and overseas. She's also Bangla translator come editor and mentors volunteer journalists from Bengal. With keen interest in ground reporting, she's also been contributing original stories for People's Archive of Rural India. And prior to joining the archive, she was working in capacity of an archivist and managing digital archives in Jadavpur University, School of Cultural Texts and Records for over a decade. In her stint as an archivist, she has managed projects under the Endangered Archives Program of the British Library, the Victoria Memorial Hall, Sir Ratan Tata Trust, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, among others. She is interested in issues related to gender, migration, agrarian economy, and folk arts. Preeti and Smita, we're really privileged to have you with us today and very excited to learn from you. The floor is yours. I would invite you, Preeti, to take us through the website and just share with us the journey of Pari, and then we'll come to your presentation, Smita. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Purnima, and thank you, Museums of Hope, for including Pari in your sessions. We're really pleased to be here, Smita and I. A little bit of a brief about Pari before we go any further. As Purnima mentioned, we are a rural archive. We have stories and other related material which is related to rural India and rural issues. Now, I just want to say a few words about the genesis of Pari and how we came about. 6 years almost to the day, Pari was formed because P. Sainath, our founding editor, who's been a rural journalist for over 35 years, he felt that there was just not enough coverage of rural issues in the daily newspapers and magazines, and basically in mainstream media. And there is actually a study by the Center for Media Studies in Delhi which says that less than 1% of news in mainstream media is about rural issues. And so Sainath started the People's Archive of Rural India to correct this. So when Pari began as being, a place where journalists could, write stories about rural issues and bring it into public consciousness and discussion and so on. But Pari has also grown in the 6 years, and it's actually much more than just the stories it has. Stories and reports are definitely form a very big part of Pari. But I want to just say a little bit, there is much more to it. For example, since Pari is about rural India, and as we all know, rural India is a place where over 700 languages are spoken. The translations aspect of Pari is a very core it fulfills Pari's mandate on multiple levels, because when we say we are a rural journal, but if we are only going to be restricted to English reading and English speaking audience, then our reach is going to be very restricted. So we are in 12 languages, as Smita will tell us more about it. We have multiple sections in Pari. So I'm going to take you through the website, but just to say that from things as simple as what is a facial diversity in India, we have a project called Faces on Pari, which can show you in different blocks of India what does an elderly person look like, what does a young child look like, so that who is this one single Indian, or what is a single Indian face? There is no such thing, and Faces is that project which shows us that. We have a project called GSP, or the Grindmill Songs Project, which brings us lovely poetry and lyrics set to music sung by women when they were grinding grain for their families in the corner of the house. And it is a living culture which has been, it's an oral culture which has been passed down, and that is also preserved on Pari. We have a huge library section in Pari, which is a resource on anything and everything to do with rural India. It has multiple rooms. So I'm going to show you all of these things. And of course, lastly, we have the youngest member of Pari, which is Pari Education, in which we have been working in the last 2 years with schools and universities around India, speaking to teachers and students about what is happening in rural India. And I can show you the website. It's there on the Pari website. But just to say that urban college and school students, this generation, are very far removed from rural India. It is not something that is in the mainstream media for them to read about. They do not probably travel there unless it's someplace exotic. So there are these huge stereotypes that exist about rural India. Either it's a very poor place, or it's very barbaric, or it is extremely exotic. So rural India is actually much more than just these two stereotypes. It is a swathe of very interesting, very alive things. And at Pari Education, we work with educational institutions to get them to get their students to start reporting on these issues. We carry the best stories. We also work with teachers in ways in which they can use Pari as a resource in their teaching. Right. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Okay. Sorry. Right. So this is the People's Archive of Rural India, the website. It's ruralindiaonline.org. We have a series of stories which on our carousel you can see. If you were to go to any one of them, I'm just going to click on this. I just want to share this with you. For example, if you click on the English button over here, right now this is a new story, so it will be published shortly in multiple languages. And then if you click on the English, on the button for language over here, there'll be a drop down telling you which are the different languages it's available in. You can read the story in pictures, so that also makes it an easy read along with the captions on the side. You can print the story and it tells you where it is from, and you can also see more from this region, right? So this is a typical Pari story. Actually, this is a multimedia story because it even has a video over here. So this is the stories, and if you were to click on the stories tab on the top, you go to the different categories that exist within Pari. For example, things we do, climate change, things we make, women, resource conflicts, getting there. So we have a number of varieties. I'm just going to take you to maybe this one, the rural and the urban. So migration forms a big part of Pari's stories. We do report a lot on migration because we believe that it is, as the title says, the rural and the urban. So there are multiple stories in any one of these, you can see. I spoke to you about the Grindmill Songs project. So here it is. Here is a Grindmill Songs project. You can actually listen to the women singing. These are the women who have created the stories. I'm sorry, the songs, who continue to sing it. All right, then we have something called the library, which is very intrinsic to Pari because it's a free resource. Anybody can use it, and it's been created it's very user friendly. So let's go to one of the rooms. Let's say we want to read something on, let's say on agriculture, right? So we click on agriculture, and let's say we want to go to the latest Essential Commodities Act. So not only do we have the entire report uploaded over here, but if you go to this arrow on the bottom right hand and you click on it, you get what is called the focus and factoids of this report. And this makes it very easy because you can decide from the focus whether this report is of relevance to you. And of course, the factoids are always useful for anyone doing research. So that's the library section. Pari Education is like I said, a new part of Pari where all these stories that you see on Pari Education have been written by students. These are, if you take the drop down, any one of these stories, let's just take migrants again. And you can see multiple stories. This is one of our recent stories about railway hawkers and about how their lives have come to a standstill during the pandemic when trains have stopped, and what happens to people who don't have any other job options. So this is the Pari Education. We also have how students can write for it, and we have about Pari Education. Sorry, I'm going to not be able to show it, but yeah. So if you click on about, you will know about how you can go to classrooms and what we do in classrooms and so on. So, okay. And you can also go back to the Pari website from here. Yeah, there we are. And about Pari, a little bit of history about Pari, Sainath. Then there is the Faces project. Sorry, I didn't show that. Let me show that as well. It's called View Faces. So you can click on any one of these faces and you'll get to hear something about, you'll get to know where this face is from and what this person has to say. For example, let's take Ramesh K. Okay, some of them have not given us a code, but some of the faces do give us, tell us something interesting. Okay, so I've stopped sharing, right? You can see. Okay, so I just want to say very little bit more, which is that, so Pari is the people's archive, meaning that we believe that lots of people can write for Pari. We don't believe that only journalists can contribute. It's very much a people's project. We believe it's an archive because we are collecting information and reports and so on. It's a living archive. So it continuously is updated. It tries to give, by bringing in culture, occupation, and so on. We are trying to bring in a 360-degree view of communities and cultures within rural India. It's also official because all our stories are very carefully verified and validated by official data so that we don't get anything wrong. There are no real opinions as such in our stories. And lastly, its focus is very, very clear. I mean, we are focused on rural India and rural issues because we feel that there is just not enough coverage of all this. So we are talking, when I say rural India, it is not a small slice of India. It's 833 million people according to the 2011 census. It is 700 plus languages. And it is thousands and thousands of different kinds of occupations and livelihoods, many of which are actually disappearing even as we speak because they are no longer sustainable. And that is where we come in, because we are documenting many of these ways of life and livelihoods which may soon just disappear because of the way that communities and so on are moving, right? I think I'll stop there now and hand it over to Smita.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity. I heard Priti talk in length about the repository of Pari. I will make an attempt to tell you how and why are we building this archive and why we call it an archive. So let me share my screen. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, Smita.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So to put things in context, I would like to dwell little on the binaries that are constantly thrusted upon us through various mainstream discourses, um, through media, and even through pedagogy. We are constantly made to believe that the modern, educated, um, and citizenry are creating the new, India within quotes, and that there is another distant which is rustic, bound by traditions, lacking education, and therefore wisdom. It often comes to us as this versus that, rural versus urban, cultured versus rustic, development versus environment. Rural is always distant, even if villages are turning into high rises overnight. And the idea of rural is always somewhere far off, pristine. You will notice that in India, the rural comes into our imagination and drawing room television and conversations only when there is a disaster, a calamity, or a horrific crime. Rural is everything opposite to our daily lives. But does this affect us, if at all? So I think they do, and they keep pushing us into physical and mental ghettos where eventually one forgets how to connect. Remember how the last trip to the nearby village was rejuvenating. But as soon as we are back, it becomes a distant memory. These binaries, tend to alienate us. But there are things that help us, to feel connected. It is people, the people whom we meet, interact with, and remember. Our memories are made of people, distant or close, related or unfamiliar. We all have something in common to share and connect. We remember those smiles, warm handshakes, a tea by the shack, the kid who showed us a little wooden toy, the dream of the young chauffeur who wanted to save for his own car, the farmer's desperation when she described how the recent hailstorm destroyed her harvest of apple orchard. And at the core of this connection, there is only one emotion, that is empathy. And that is what drives us, every one of us at the People's Archive of Rural India. And that is why we consciously chose to create an archive of a different sort that talks about the everyday lives of everyday people of rural India. In the next few slides, I will take you through how people are at the core of Pari. Every Pari story revolves around an individual or a community. The voice and experience of common people define our narratives. Another unique aspect of our endeavor is the diversity of representation by design. While there are very experienced and trained journalists who report and write for Pari, there is a large pool of contributors from the marginal communities, Adivasis, Dalits, women, and even children, as Priti said, who report their own stories. As this expands, the archive will be able to include even more diversity of voices, narratives, perspectives from different corners of India. While everyone can contribute to Pari, no one actually owns it. There is no single dominant sponsor or a corporate sponsor. Common people like you and me contribute in the form of labor and money that help us run this platform. As often our founding editor comes across a question, what is your revenue model? That is what helps us to remain true to our stakeholders, the everyday people. Our volunteers contribute with reporting, donations, technical support, and of course, with translations. The scale of our translation is unique, driven by an overzealous pool of translation volunteers. Our stories are available in 11 to 12 dominant languages. So far, 11 languages are more or less stabilized. We are in the process of adding more languages to our language pool. As per 2011 census, only 10% of India can speak or read English. And of that, only 0.02% has English as their first language. So translating stories help us create a unique reach. While a story from Bengal Sundarbans, when translated in Bengali, helps in connecting back to the people who are part of that story, when translated in Marathi, the story has the potential to reach to the fishing communities of Maharashtra who face the same challenges of dwindling mangroves and other similar climatic shifts. These translations are creating a unique network beyond the dominant hegemonies of Hindi and English. Also, it is pertinent to note that in this age of digital clutter and fatigue, we do not spend a dime in promoting our content. The audience that we have gained, the interest, admiration, and love that we have received from across the country and many places in the globe is the result of word of mouth. Every like, share, and comment across social media has made Pari reach more and more people. One may wonder, how is Pari different from any social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, a platform of people to share and consume content, and why we call it an archive? Well, couple of points to note that we think qualifies us as an archive are: it is where everyday people talk about themselves, which otherwise we fail to see. Secondly, in the words of Sainath, as a journalistic platform, we are trying to document the living past and contemporary present while also creating the textbook for the future. We are trying to create those conversations and arguments in society that are usually swept under the carpet of corporate or mass media. And to become that archive, we are documenting the moments of importance from rural India. I will spend a couple of minutes on the institutional idea of archive. World-renowned gold standards of archiving, as defined by the British Library or the Dublin Core Standards for digital archiving, have helped archivists across the globe in the process of conservation and preservation. These standards help in preserving information that is available to the last dot of the manuscript. This verifiability is what differentiates a great archive. At Pari, we have taken the learnings from archiving standards and coupled them with journalistic integrity to redefine our methodology. Every report has to go through the rigor of the 8 points that you see on the screen to become a story for Pari. Every quote is traceable. Every information is verifiable. In Pari, the process is as important as the outcome. We do not document the artifact only. We focus on documenting the maker, her work, hard labor through her story. But why do we need to do this? Where did this need come from? More than 60% of our population is from rural India. We have almost 800 languages that are spoken, and as we interact, many of them are already dead. Like Saimar is a language in Tripura which is spoken by only a few people. We have almost 90 scripts. This is the extent of the rich diversity of languages in India. Rural India provides livelihoods beyond what we can fathom. From epic poem singers to gods dressmakers, from potters to toddy tappers, from professional storytellers to prawn catchers, the diversity is astonishing. But this could all vanish in our lifetime. Because the agriculture is at crisis. Every hour as we speak, a farmer dies by suicide in India. Farmers are becoming laborers and migrating to the cities for jobs that don't exist. As the agrarian crisis deepens, with nearly half of India under drought, the farmer facing existential crisis. If the farmer cannot survive, the potters, tappers, poem singers will also cease to exist. The backbone of India is crumbling. We are into civilizational crisis. As the state withdraws itself from the notion of welfare, more than 60% of India will be left to the perils of the market forces. Even without a little safety net. as welfare of the collective is at stake, there will not be any question of well-being too. The glimpse of which caught our attention when lakhs of migrant workers started walking back to their villages. As I spoke before, unless there is a calamity or sensational incidents, rural India hardly finds space in mass media. So mass media controlled by the corporates does not speak about the rural realities. It takes farmers from the villages to walk hundreds of kilometers in the scorching sun or chilling cold to reach to Mumbai or to the gates of Delhi to catch our attention. Farmers are protesting the pro-corporate farm bill since June 2020, but the news hit the national dailies only when they were knocking at the gates of Delhi. So some statistics, as Priti has already mentioned, to show how underrepresented the distant rural is in the mass media. Not even 1% of print space is allocated. Long before the gig economy came in vogue, agriculture and labor correspondents were axed. Rural was not newsworthy. And romanticizing with the idea of Jai Kisan is one of our favorite pastimes. But less than 8% are officially farmers. Entire rural India is perceived to be dhoti clad, bare chested, with a pair of oxen. And talking about the imagery, women who actually do the bulk of the work do not fit the farmer narrative. So our narrative is anchored in a living reality of rural people and is filled with storytelling idioms inspired by folklores and also with the references to the challenges faced by the people and the communities. I would read two paragraphs from a story from our climate change series where we are chronicling climate change from multiple climate and agroecological zones across the country through the voices of and the lived experiences of ordinary Indians. So in this story that you this on the screen, I am talking about this story that you are seeing on the screen. So Professor Parthasarathi, a geologist, says in this story, climate change, it's from Maharashtra's Thane district. So this geologist, Professor Parthasarathi, says in this story, climate change affects rainfall patterns. Studies show that the beginning of the rainy season and withdrawal of monsoon, wet and dry spells, and total amount of rainfall are all changing with adverse impacts on sowing date, rate of germination, total yield, sometimes leading to large-scale crop failure. Now, one of the protagonists in the story, Indubai, in Nehroli village, 124 kilometers from Birsingpara, 60-year-old Indu Agiwali, who belongs to the Ma Thakur Adivasi community, also speaks of these changing patterns. I'm quoting her. We would sow the seeds in Rohini Nakshatra, that is between May 25 to June 7. By the time Pushya, that is 20th July to 2nd August. So during the Pushya, when the Pushya Nakshatra arrives, our crops would be ready for transplanting. Till the Chaitra Nakshatra, that is 10th October to 23rd October, we would start cutting and threshing. Now all this paddy cultivation process get delayed. For long now, the rainfall is not according to the nakshatras. I don't understand why. Hindu also speaks of the growing heat. I have never seen such heat in my whole life. When I was a child, it used to start raining heavily in the Rohini nakshatra. It would be continuous rain that cooled down the heated land after summer. The aroma of wet soil would be in the air. Now that aroma has become rare, she says, while digging holes at the edges to make barricades on her 2-acre farmland. So you see, Pari's content is the source material. Now I'm coming to the archiving part. I'm not, getting into the nitty-gritties of how an archive is built and what should be the, protocols, because we know there are standards, universal standards, and following that only one repository becomes an archive. So Pari's content is the source material for those who want to study the lives of people living in the margins and the challenges and the complexities their lives are riddled with. You meet a nameless laborer at one of your city's construction sites, or a woman domestic worker helping with your housework. We are used to see them as numbers and data in reportage and newspaper articles, or maybe just as a fleeting face sometimes. But they are people, real people, and every one of them is unique and has a different life story to tell. We at Pari listen to them. And to be an empathetic listener, you have to educate yourself. All of us go through rigorous training. We unlearn the prejudices that are embedded in our locational privileges. We bring in the details and keep aside our criticism and opinions. Our narratives are built on this detailed rendering, simple on the surface, but full of intricacies that we otherwise fail to notice in popular and mainstream narratives of the everyday people. Through the plotting, you get to understand the caste, class-based social origin of the protagonists. This makes Pari a unique archive. As an archivist, I have always dwelt on the idea that how one researches a particular time. 50 years down the line, when someone tries to look at archives, say, for example, regarding the state of the manual scavengers, what would we have? The numbers of daily deaths of manual scavengers or Safai Karmcharis? Would we be knowing what that dead person's life was? How did he or she survive? Did she have access to health care? What was the food that they could afford? His or her life is not just about that accidental death. It's also about their lived lives. The complete apathy of the society towards these people's lives. So when we look at the lives of manual scavengers, we also look at the apathy of the society. When we talk about farmers, we see them as people who give us food, people who ensured this country's food security. But would we not look at their lives from the prism of food justice? Should we not talk about their provincial isolation? Should we not look at how the corporate run media systematically dismantled the most important category of journalism, that is rural reporting? Their invisibility is very much connected to media's vested interests. We would see the same corporations that own the media are the beneficiaries of agricultural reforms unleashed when our economy got a neoliberal makeover. Since then, we have been seeing how the reforms broke the backbone of rural India. Every story of Pari on farmer suicide, migration, climate change, rural health care, education, Adivasi and Dalit lives point towards the failure of these reforms. Coming back to the crux, how does one research a particular time? Well, one cannot do that without hearing the people, without knowing the intricate details of their lives. We in Pari don't believe in dispassionate documentation. As an archive, our aim is to create a new way of seeing. Archiving is about bringing something to notice. It's about searching. It's about making hitherto invisible and bracketed off knowledge, information, and words. As a journalistic archive on rural India, we have the responsibility to document the great process under which much of rural India has vanished, and in coming decades, a lot of it would cease to exist. Our job is to document the injustice and inequality born out of this colossal agrarian distress through the lived experiences of people. Archiving is about locating, and we are locating extraordinary lives of ordinary people whom the media doesn't consider enough to be news. I would like to read a few lines from one of our recent stories. It's a story about a Bengali scrap collector, uh, popularly known as Kabadiwala, Kalu Das. It's been 25 years since Kalu Das has been collecting scrap from various neighborhoods in South and East Kolkata. He worked for a film distribution company in the city before he became a Kabadiwala. I used to transport film reels for Neptune Pictures Private Limited, he says. Orders for 35mm reels came from Bombay, Delhi, Madras. I took the reels, which came in huge trunks to Howrah, measured their weight, and passed them on for distribution. When the company closed down, Das ended up jobless. At this time, he stayed in a rented house in Bospukur area of South Kolkata. His neighbor introduced him to the recycling trade. When I lost my job, he asked me to join him in his work. He said, I will give you rupees 25 every day. You will set out at 8 a.m. and be back home soon. You will have to carry stuff and roam around with me. We will have cups of tea together. I agreed. I learned from him like a master teacher, like a master teaches his students. He was my guru. Das observed his teacher and learned how to calculate the price of each item: paper, plastic, glass bottles, iron, and other metals. How much will 150 grams, 200 gram, 250 gram, and 500 gram cost? I also learned to distinguish between materials. The market was good back then, he recalls, when he started over 2 decades ago. An apparently simple story, it talks about Kalubabu's journey from a rural farm household to the city as a scrap collector. What we discard, what is just throwable to us, is his lifeline. Collecting those throwables involve a great deal of training, learning, and labor. On a different level, this story from a scrap collector's experiences points towards our shift from an analog world to a smart and digital one, and how in that process we have left behind a large chunk of the population. Our archive is aimed towards bringing in change in the existing journalistic discourse. It is about questioning the status quo. And above all, our archive is also a site of resistance because we are building something by breaking the conditioned and prejudiced aesthetic limitations of storytelling. As I finish this presentation, I would leave you with this slide with this quote. He is one of my favorite poets, Mohammad Darwish, and it says, "I don't decide to represent anything except myself, but that self is full of collective memory." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Smita. Thank you. Thank you, Preeti. Thank you, Smita. This is so powerful. I'm just so overwhelmed and inspired right now. I don't have words to express it. This, I hope that all museum professionals, archivists, cultural resource professionals go through this, because this is really something that we need to think about. It questions our own ethics and responsibilities. I often wonder when I see this Madhubani painting in the Crafts Museum. It's a mural where they show the farming, they show the entire village scenario in Madhubani, in Varli. And I often wonder that why are we just looking at that one aspect of the painting and not asking the questions about the lives depicted in those murals over there?
Can I add, Purnima?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
please. So thank you, Smita. I just wanted to add to a few things that Smita said. And actually, Purnima, you touched upon one of them with the Madhubani painting. And that is, in Pari, our aim is very much to report not just a craft, let's say, we talk about craft in a very technical, intellectual fashion, but we believe that craft, let's say, and the craftsperson cannot be separated. So in Pari, when we talk about a craft, we also talk a lot about the craftsperson, their family, their aspirations, their history, their inheritance. All that is also woven into a story on craft, because we do not believe. In the same way, when we cover livelihoods in Pari, we are looking at it as a livelihood, not just, a job that somebody is doing. So there is an inherited aspect to it as well, right? And there is a community aspect to livelihood as well, because as Smita mentioned, about agriculture, it's not just agriculture which is represented in Pari. It's the whole agrarian economy. So it's the weaver, it's the potter, it's the carpenter, it's the blacksmith, everybody who contributes to keep that farmer and cultivators going. So definitely agriculture forms the center of an agrarian economy, but these other people's lives are as important, and it's part of a whole community. So when we said earlier that we are archiving stories about agriculture and rural India, it's not just about farming. It's much more than farming. And the other point that I wanted to touch upon was that in Pari, one of our mandates is very strongly to not be the people speaking on behalf of the people we write about, whether it's Kaludas, as Smita said, or somebody else. We actually are just giving that space to somebody to talk about their lives. We are not taking that agency away from them. We are not speaking on their behalf. We are not we don't imagine that we have that right to do that. So that's something that is very critical to our mandate, that we don't take over the discussion and take over the language, right? And how do we do this? Smita mentioned, about the accuracy and the verifiability of Pari stories. One of the very critical things that we do in Pari is also feel that we do not do armchair rural journalism. We actually go out in the field, we spend time there, we immerse ourselves in that story before we can attempt to write it. So it's not as though, we just, we're writing, sitting in a city, we're writing about rural India. And the last point I just wanted to mention was that when we're talking about archiving and reporting and documenting and so on, especially I talk about documentation, we don't document only a certain happening. We don't document a news which is broken, let's say in rural India. We are documenting the processes behind that news. And that is a very critical part of what we do in Pari. So if there is, for example, let us say that there is, a farmer protest in, let's say in, Orissa, we are not just documenting that, 500 farmers came, this is the place they came to, and so on. That is what a news agency would do. We are asking the question, why are farmers protesting? What has brought them to the city? What is their condition of their, occupation, livelihood, incomes, and so on, which is compelling them to, protest? What is it they're protesting against? So we like to cover the entire process. Yeah. So I just thought I'd add that in.
That's beautiful, because it's a bit different from how in a traditional archive it might just be limited to what happened, the event, just like the news. Even the archive would not really investigate and go deeper into the event on its own.
And especially in livelihoods and craft and so on, I think in Pari it is kind of, we do not think any other way right now other than documenting the craft, the livelihood, and the person who is in that.
Right.
So it's not an intellectual, journey. It's, you really have to understand the people as well.
Right, like a deeper systemic understanding of everything.
We hope so.
So, Preeti, I just wanted to request you if you could just share a little bit more about the education and in the classroom programs.
Okay, so Smita had mentioned that Pari is about the everyday lives of everyday people. So in Pari education, it's actually quite simple. What we are saying is that there are these hundreds of different livelihoods, there's millions of people in rural India. And why is it that they are not our heroes? Why is it that we don't know anything about their lives? And we have found that actually there is a lot that people can learn and teach from the lives and livelihoods of people in rural India, and the struggles they go through and the triumphs they have. And they are very inspiring lives. For example, I'll give you an example about a story that I wrote about a young tribal boy who is the first generation learner from his family. He had to leave school, at 12 and 13 when his father died, and there was a huge medical bill to pay. So he worked with his mother. They repaid the bill. Then he went back to school. So he finished school quite late. And at 36, he worked very hard. And he educated himself. He got loans and grants and so on. And he became a linguistic scholar. And finally, he did a PhD. But he didn't do a PhD on some esoteric thing. He did a PhD on his tribe's language. And he tried to document, because they don't have a script, the Alukurumba tribals. And this boy's name is Vishwanath, Ravi Vishwanathan. So Ravi Vishwanathan today is a PhD scholar. And the focus of his PhD is his tribe's language. And the hundreds of riddles and proverbs and songs and so on that, an oral language like his would have. So he is, in a sense, a very inspiring story. But we don't know about this because we tend to, these stories don't come out. And, our idea of for example, let's take freedom fighters. When every year when Independence Day comes around in schools and colleges around India, we are told again about Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, etc., etc. But actually, Sainath has done an entire series on the foot soldiers of Indian freedom. People who live in villages in India, who perhaps were recognized for a short while during independence, but then after that they've forgotten and they've gone back to their lives. So what do they have to say about India's freedom and independence? And, why have we forgotten their role and their contribution? So these are some of the things which, we want to bring in Pari education. We want more students to understand. But going further from that, we realize that until you get students to actually engage in rural issues. And when I say engage, I mean as a journalist, you have to research it and write about it, interview somebody like say Kaludas and find out about his life. It's when students actually begin engaging that the real learning happens. So yes, I can see a comment, Ravi Vishwanathan, yes, and Alu Kurumba tribe. In the Nilgiris. You can find the story on Pari if you key in Alu Kurumba, ALU Kurumba. So So yeah, so in education, we have found now that it's very important that students and teachers and so on bring these stories into the curriculum. They are not seen as additional stories. So we're fighting very hard against that, that, you know, it's not something exotic that we wanted to hear about. We're saying this is how agriculture happens. And when I speak in schools and colleges, I begin very early in my discussion by telling students and teachers that, see, this is not some rural India, not some different planet. The food you eat, the resources that you consume, electricity, water, and so on, all come from somewhere in rural India. There is a miner somewhere digging out, you know, the coal in Orissa or Jharkhand, which is fueling your fan or your light. The food you are eating has come from, you know, some farmer in some part of India producing it. So you should know what is happening in India. You should understand the interconnectedness between your life and their life. And migrants, for example, when on March 24th, everybody woke up and said, who are these migrants? Why are they going back? Sainath often talks about this, that, you know, India discovered migrants on the 24th of March. But at Pari, actually, we have students who have been documenting migrants for the last 2 years. And if you come to Pari Education, we have a whole series. It's called Journeys of Hope, Profiles of Migrants, Journeys of Hope, and it is already in 4 parts. And it is work done by students to document whether you are a maid or you're a driver or you're a construction worker. What was your journey into urban India? Was it failing farms? Was it, like Smita mentioned, you know, drought and, you know, big loans to be paid for tube wells that had been dug? Or was it that your parents put you to work because they needed the money to feed your family? So who are these people who live next to us in urban India? So students went out and started interviewing them, and it's been a great learning. One student wrote and told me that he said, I never knew people traveled from all the way from, you know, North Bihar to Bangalore just to earn 5,000 rupees extra a month. It was inconceivable to this urban student, and not in a very expensive school, and just a regular middle class school. And like that, we have discovered students have, if you go, you know, to the end of our stories, you'll read how students are reacting about this learning that is happening. A young boy who's written about a kidney patient in Rajkot recently, our most recent Pari Education story, which is on right now up there. He said that I never knew that there is such a big difference between urban and rural India in terms of healthcare. So this is the kind of awareness and sensitization of young Indians that we are trying to do in Pari Education. And we are saying learn, not just, you know, academic learning, but learn about people and lives from these stories.
So it's excellent, Preeti. Thank you so much for sharing this. Oh, we have a message for you from Dr. Sangeeta Dhar from Delhi University. Her students would like to collaborate with Pari in future. Okay.
Yes, sure, Ms. Dhar, please get in touch with us. Write to us at Pari Education. You can have a look on the site. We have students from all over India writing for us, and PhD students as well as standard level students. We are, you know, collaborating with different universities to teach development economics, investigative journalism, agrarian journalism. So we'll be very happy to work with you. Please do get in touch.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Priti. It was wonderful listening to you. I don't know whether you can see me or not. Yeah, yes. In fact,
yes, now I can see you. Thank you.
Yeah, it has been an eye-opener for me, actually, because of this message, you know, I came across in the Facebook. I was really happy. I wanted to be a part of it. And then I got constant reminders. But nevertheless, you people are doing a very great job, but then not much of it is known, you know, in the university circles. So I was like, because I teach political science and I teach public
we are a
administration.
very small team actually at Pari.
Yeah, I teach public administration and public policy, and you know, we have a course curriculum. We have a course curriculum on rural India, but of course,
just one minute. Sorry, my internet. I couldn't hear you for a minute. You said something about course curriculum.
Yeah. I said we have a course curriculum.
Can you repeat that?
we have a course curriculum in undergraduation syllabus on rural India and rural India, and then we study its policies. Then we have we look into the administration aspect. But I can involve my students in certain assignments along with Pari, so that we can have a collaborative venture, and that will be really really interesting for the students. And because we have students from all over India, so those who study in DU, and then this can really be we can really take it up as a good exercise for them.
Yes, we are doing that actually. So we're very happy to do it with more students, and please do get in touch. And also to say that in terms of learning resources, we are also providing
I will be happy if I can have the
support
mail
and
ID,
use also.
mail
So
ID or the phone number.
yeah, I'll just put it on the chat box. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question from Jasmine. So, does your archive consist of stories written by your archivers? How do you separate the author's influence from the story? By that, she means it seems that there is a lot of interpretation that the archivists are doing, and interpreting the material inevitably means inserting the interpreter's opinions and unconscious biases into the material that is archived. How do you deal with this? Do your stories involve the direct speech of the people you interview? Her apologies if this has already been addressed because she joined us later.
Smita, would you like to answer that? You have to unmute yourself, Smita.
Yeah, we rely on the quotes of the protagonists of the story. And about, if you go through Pari stories, you would see that they are not at all opinion based. And we obviously, when someone writes, someone sees something from his or her own perspective. But there comes the teaching that we have to go through, the training that we go through, when we write a Pari story. And for us, it's absolutely important to have that person's first person narrative. Actually, that dominates our narrative. Around that, we weave our narrative.
Yeah.
So yes.
So just to add to that, very a very important part of our reporting is, of course, bringing in the voices of the people that we're speaking to. Like Smita said, there are a lot of quotes, but and yes, we try not to put in our opinion, but I think that by the very choice of that subject that we are doing, we are bringing that bias to the story, that we are choosing rural India, or we are choosing stories about rural issues. But beyond that, we try and be as but it is not possible to not have your heart in the story you write. I don't know if that answers your question.
I mean, there cannot be something called neutrality. We cannot be neutral. Or when I'm writing something, I will obviously be present in that. But that the way we look at a story, the way we don't actually, if you compare our stories with the reports or articles that come up in the news dailies or other portals, would see that they are completely different. You will always remember the faces of the people when you read a Pari story. You will remember their quotes, you will remember their struggles and their dreams, or whatever the story is about. You will remember that. That's because it's always told from the perspective of that from that person's life. That is supreme to us.
And also we use good journalism in the sense that even if we are writing, for example, I'm writing a story about Adivasi people being displaced from a sanctuary by the forest department, I will have a quote from the forest department. I cannot carry a story only with the Adivasi people's quotes in it. It will have to be, I won't use the word balanced, but I will have to get a quote from the forest department because they are being accused of something, and it would not be correct for me not to have their point of view in it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Purnima, Smita, and Priti, I have a question.
Yes, we do have archivists from the rural communities. We are trying very hard to, in fact, draw more reporters in from rural areas, from marginalized areas. We are trying very hard to have Adivasi reporters, Dalit reporters. This we understand that that this is a need to have people from different communities telling their own stories, telling other people's stories, so that not just voices, but the filters also are different. And we are working on this. In Pari, we have a fellowship program. We have fellows from different communities. We have people now actually reporting in different languages other than English and then getting translated back into English and other languages. This is something that we are growing at Pari, and it is definitely a very important part of our archiving. We see that, but it is not. As I said, we are a very small team, so training. As Smita I said, there's a lot of training that goes in. So training does take a lot of time. But yes, we are very conscious and cognizant of this.
Thank you, Preeti and Smita. Dhruva wants to ask a question. Dhruva, you can
Yeah.
go ahead and ask the question. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi Dhruva. Little louder, please.
Okay. Hi. Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to be. It's morning here, very early morning. Anyway, I'm from Oklahoma State University, and I work with oral history department here in the university. And I have a logistical question. I was thinking, so why are you not publishing the whole interview instead of just quotes with your story?
Well, I'll answer that for you very quickly. The whole interview, see, if you are reporting, for example, a story about one person, right? You would need to give some context to the interview. Otherwise, we don't publish in the interview format. We are publishing in the storytelling format. So for storytelling, you will use their quotes, yes, if it's one person that you're going to talk, one person's story, for example. But if you are writing about a community, then you would like to get different people's voices from that community in. Right? So the interview format is not something that we are very fond of. We prefer the storytelling format for various reasons. Yeah? I don't know.
Okay.
Smita, would you like to add to that? Unmute yourself.
I agree with Preeti. At the same time, there are stories which is broadly based on interviews, like our Freedom Fighter series.
Yes.
Those are based on long, arduous interviews. And our founding editor had to travel a great deal to locate these people, because they are not those freedom fighters whom we get to see in our history books, in our textbooks. These are obscure people. A 90-year-old Adivasi lady living in a far off village in Odisha, hardly remembered. So, and we interviewed them thoroughly, and on the basis of those interviews we have come up with stories. On In this series, all the stories are based on these interviews, and many of them are dead now. So it is in fact our um, earnest endeavor to document the last living freedom fighters who are very old now. And the latest one is from Tamil Nadu, a very well known leader and unionist, Sankaraya. So he's I think he just Priti, he just
Yeah,
he's uh,
maybe
I think
80s,
no
eight,
more. I
more
think
than
he's
90, yeah.
yeah. I think he's 99
Yeah, but
or
what
something.
Smita is saying is true. I mean, when necessary, especially if you, but you must listen to Captain Bhau's interview, Dhruba. I'm sure you will enjoy it as the interview format because it is a truly fabulous interview about not just about his time as a a rebel in British India, but also his comment about, he said, we fought for India's freedom and independence. We got our independence, but not our freedom. I mean, and here is a man who was in his 80s when Sainath interviewed him. Very, very amazing stories.
Another question. I don't want to take too much time, but I just wanted to ask, how do you handle certain things? Like, what if a person comes back and tells you not to publish their name for like 5 or 10 years, or back and says that they need you to withdraw their face and whatever
Consent,
they
yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the first things a Pari journalist learns is called consent. We do not do a single story without consent, photographic consent for their photo as well as consent for their story. And there are some stories in which we have got that consent, but we have offered to not use their name. So for example, on a series we are doing now on reproductive health for young women, most of the stories do not carry the young women's names because they may be penalized for it, for speaking out and so on. So we are extremely conscious of this. We do not want to put any of the people that we speak to in any kind of danger, or danger of punitive action by the community, or so on. Our first responsibility as reporters is towards the people that we are writing about. We cannot write a story unless we have their consent. So
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, and we do have those in place, but we also have the responsibility to, if they come back and they are the sole author of the narrator is the sole author of the story, it's their property. And if they come back and tell us to withdraw their story, we are kind of, we do that. Um, did you ever face that kind of problem?
So far, we've never touchwood faced any kind of, at least as editor in Pari Education, as well as for my own stories, I can say for a fact that I've never had anyone come back and say to me, "You either you quoted me wrongly, or can you take my name off the story?" And I think that is also the power of Sainath's editing and the kind of journalism that he has passed on to us, in which we do not write stories which we feel that the person who we are writing about or who is telling their story feels in some way distanced from it, or feels that they are objectified in the story. Uh, we try very hard to make sure that person in the story is completely us. So I don't know, Smita, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't
Yeah,
had anyone ask us to pull out a
no,
story.
no, no. It has never happened so far. Um, but there are incidents, and I can share one incident with you. Recently, we published a story about these students of Sundarban who are constantly, you know, they are dropouts, and during the pandemic, they had to leave studies and go to different cities and different states as to work as migrant laborers to earn some money. Um, so this photojournalist, he made a photo story, and when it got published, suddenly he started getting calls, and he got back to us and said that I'm really feeling a bit nervous. Can you please see what's happening? And it's not that our authors who write and report for us, with us, we leave them alone. Okay, you did your work and okay, fine, bye, tata. No, not it doesn't happen that way here. So we are always in touch with our reporters, our authors, and if they face any problem, we as a team handle that. So we got back to this person and got the details, and then the what happened was in the education department, the secretary, state secretary of education department, happened to be a avid Pari story reader. Okay, so it was for him a great matter of embarrassment that under his administration, the students for whom they are trying to give so many, they are trying to get these students back to the school. They are providing with very many schemes and so on, yet the students are not going to the school and they are dropping out, and it's a matter of great embarrassment for them. So he actually ordered his uh, junior staffs in the local area to go and check what's happening. And so it was in a positive, it was a positive feedback. The phone calls that the author got was actually was a positive response. And the admin people from the administration visited the area and talked to the parents of the kids who were dropping out of the schools and so on. They are trying to fix that the entire thing. So yes, this happens. But yes, and there are times when we might have missed something. There are times when we ourselves have discovered that we have missed something. There are there maybe a place is named same place is spelled in a two different way in the similar story, and we correct that. We have a very rigorous editing process. So these are the minor things that sometimes happen. But since we have multiple layer of checking, it goes to the editing team, and then again when while translating we are again going through each word. So nothing, actually it's very difficult to have uh, such mistakes or but what Dhruva said, yeah, no, never, so far never. We never had that as of now.
Thank you, Smita and Priti. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Smita.
Can I just add also one more thing, and that is that very much a part of what is missing in journalism is sometimes gender, women's voices. And at Pari, one of our mandates is to always make sure that when we are writing about whether it is craft or livelihood or community or agriculture or anything, that we ensure that women also get a voice in our stories. And it doesn't just become, because in rural India, as reporters, you might find that, of course, the front line of people who will meet you will all be men. So you can also come away from there thinking that, like Smita mentioned, that only men do agriculture and so on. So getting voices of women in our stories is very much a part of what we work very hard at, to make sure that they are not excluded, because that generally tends to be the situation in the rest of the media.
For that point, Preeti. I think Pema wanted to ask a question. Pema,
May I?
yes, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, actually,
Hi,
hi.
Pema.
It was a wonderful session.
Thank
I'm
you.
from Sikkim. So I work in a handicraft museum. Actually, I'm a museologist. So like recently I've joined handicraft and the handloom department. So like actually, I wanted to document the like art and the artist life. Okay, because so far we have not documented any of it. So like we can say like part of it are lost. Those who are like gone, their documentation hasn't done any, like we didn't do any documentation, so we lost their what you call their knowledge, their technique, and everything. So I just wanted to ask, like, how do I go about? Because this is the first time, I'm, like seeing this kind of session. So it's very wonderful for me, like, because I don't have any like friend circle to discuss about all this. So I just
You can
wanted to
write
know.
to us, Pima.
Okay.
You can write to us and we can, guide you through it, through the, I mean, and actually it may be good for you to just start with one craft in Sikkim that you feel is still alive and that you would get enough people to talk about, right? Uh, but it's very important that, as I mentioned earlier, that the craftsperson and the family and the location and the community is also involved in your coverage of craft. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe you can write to us and maybe start with one, and then we can help you figure it out. And that's the way I can see forward. We are a community. You can always reach out to us. We'd be happy to help and share.
Actually, you must have heard about the Thanka painting, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, then handloom, like we do it here. And we use lots of natural dyes and no, so we can always document these
Yeah,
things, right?
absolutely.
So I
Yeah.
just wanted to do it. So it will be a great help if
Yeah,
you,
please write to us, because we get people writing to us all the time and also you can check out the Pari website to see where it says contribute to Pari. So you can learn from that also how to document. I mean, that can be a bit of a guideline for you.
okay.
Guide for you. Even in Pari Education is a simpler version of that. It says write for Pari in the Pari Education website.
Okay.
You can check that out and write to us. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so Prema,
Thank you so much.
Preeti is
Yeah.
being very modest. Let me tell you that she herself is very much interested in the, in documenting the
Craft document.
vanishing crafts and
Yeah.
so on, and especially the she uh, works in the Nilgiri areas, the potters, the weavers. She has done, quite a number of.
Craft is something I really enjoy. I have also done a book with Crafts Council of India on stone craft. I've been the editor for that. So I just want to share maybe something a little interesting for all of you, since I also do this in education. So in one school once we had gone, and the students told us, "Oh, ma'am, we know, we went to rural India. We went and saw this, ikat craft technique of weaving happening." So I said, "Okay, that's fantastic." And then my colleague and I, we told them about Pari and rural India, and we showed them different Pari stories, and including a few on weaving. And at the end of that discussion, we asked the students, "So what is that one question that you didn't ask when you went to the craft community?" And they said, "We didn't ask them how long it takes to weave a sari." So you see, they had understood everything intellectually. They had understood everything about the warp, the weft, the length, the thickness of this of the weave, of the thread, and so on. But the simple economics of the craftsperson's life, of how will they sustain this, had not been. They never thought of it until we showed them this part. So that's why we were saying that you can check out the Pari stories on craft and maybe get an idea. And yes, please do write to us.
Priti, Smita, there are more questions, but I just have a follow-up on Pema's question. It's more like a request. Maybe you could develop like a short training course for people who work in museums and archives or interested in this, because we would really benefit a lot from such training. Okay, so I'll also go to the next question, which is from Brunalini. She's an open learner, unschooler. She's 16 years old. She wants to be a part of Pari. Can she be a part of Pari, and how?
Wow, everyone can be a part of Pari. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you see, we have younger than 16 also contributing to Pari. Come and see our Inspired by Pari series in the Pari Education. Even our stories are there by If you are interested in documenting the lives of people whose voices are not heard, who are otherwise invisible, please write to us at Pari Education and read our guidelines for writing, and tell us what you'd like to write about. Most welcome. It will be a huge learning, I promise you that.
There's a comment from Priyanka Panjwani. She's a conservation architect based in Mumbai, and she discovered on Twitter the cow dung and GDB story, which was great. Are there any more questions from anyone?
Somebody from Folkartpedia has a question, but I don't see.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
But I can't see them.
Yeah. Yes, I think they dropped out.
No, they're here.
मैं हूँ।
Oh, they're here.
नमस्ते जी।
नमस्ते, मेरा नाम सुनील कुमार है। मैं वैसे जर्नलिज्म में ही रहा हूँ, लेकिन आजकल मैं फोक में काम करता हूँ
जी।
मैं दरअसल ध्रुवा की बात सुन रहा था और मेरा एक कंसर्न है दरअसल ध्रुवा की बात को ही आगे लेते हुए। उन्होंने कहा कि हम पूरा इंटरव्यू क्यों पब्लिश नहीं कर सकते। ये सवाल मेरा इसलिए भी है क्योंकि मैंने लगातार पिछले 5 साल डॉक्यूमेंटेशन में शामिल रहा हूं मैं और लगातार कर भी रहा हूं, अभी भी कर रहा हूं। हमने ऐसी अनेक स्टोरीज देखी जिसमें हमारे जो आर्टिजन्स हैं, जो रूरल आर्टिजन्स हैं, उनकी वॉइसेस को सप्रेस कर दिया गया। उनको लेकर के जो राइटिंग्स है, उन राइटिंग्स में वो पूरी स्टोरी चेंज हो गई, वो पूरा नरेशन चेंज हो गया जो उन्होंने कहा। और मेरे पास प्रूव्स हैं, अनेक आर्टिस्ट के बातचीत हैं जिन्होंने कहा कि मैंने तो ये कहा और उन्होंने पूरी बात बदल दी। अनेक ऐसी स्टोरी जिसमें उनकी पूरी बात खत्म हो जाती है। वो जो कह रहे हैं वो डिजास्टर कह रहे हैं, वो डिजास्टर को बयान कर रहे हैं, लेकिन उस डिजास्टर को हमने लिखने में बेईमानी करके अपने हित में उसका इस्तेमाल कर लिया। तो मेरा एक छोटा सा सवाल यही है कि क्या इस तरह के सप्लीमेंट्स या फील्ड नोट्स को भी हम पब्लिश नहीं कर सकते हैं? क्या उसकी आवश्यकता नहीं है? ईदर इन द फॉर्मेट ऑफ रिटन मटेरियल और ऑडियो और वीडियो, हम उसको कलेक्ट करें कि आप जो भी स्टोरीज लिख रहे हैं आप अपने फील्ड नोट्स हमें दीजिए ताकि हम उसको रेक्टिफाई भी कर पाएं।
हम तो वीडियो भी कई स्टोरीज में हम वीडियो भी करते हैं, तो जिनकी आवाजें वो जो हम जिनके बारे में हम लिख रहे हैं, जो टेक्स्ट में उनके कोट्स ले रहे हैं, उनका वीडियो में भी आप सुन सकते हैं कि वही कह रहे हैं। और आप जो कह रहे हैं न्यूज के बारे में कि जो कोई कहता है उसको कैसे वैसे निकाल के
मैं न्यूज के बारे में बात नहीं कर रहा हूँ प्रीति।
अच्छा,
मैं
खाली
बात
फोक
कर
के
रहा
बारे
हूँ
में।
स्टोरीज, इंटरव्यूज और ये सारी चीजें जो
अच्छा।
जिसको हम डॉक्यूमेंट करते हैं, जिसके बेस पर हम स्टोरीज डेवलप करते हैं। हम कोट्स जब लेते हैं तो कोट्स को हम अपनी सोच, अपनी विचारधारा के हिसाब से मॉडिफाई कर देते हैं, जबकि आर्टिजन्स कुछ और कह रहे होते हैं।
तो सर वो तो बहुत ही अनएथिकल है, कुछ अगर न्यूज में हो या इसमें हो या कहीं पे भी हो, दैट इज इनकरेक्ट एंड इट्स अनएथिकल, इट्स लाइक चीटिंग। सो आई मीन होपफुली इन पारी वी डोंट।
तो मेरा सवाल आपसे
स्मिता।
दरअसल यही था कि क्या आप लोग ये भी कर रहे हैं कि जो भी आपको स्टोरीज दे रहे हैं आप उनसे फील्ड नोट्स या उनके जो ऑडियो रिकॉर्डिंग्स है या वीडियो रिकॉर्डिंग्स है वो कह रहे हैं कि आप हमें सौंपिए ताकि हम एक्चुअली उसको रेक्टिफाई कर पाए कि आप जो भेज रहे हैं मुझे वो सही है या गलत है? मैंने ये
बड़े बिल्कुल हम तो वापस व्हाट्सएप पे उनसे चेक भी करते हैं, हम उनको फोन करके पूछते हैं कि हम कह रहे हैं कि आप ये बोले थे, आप ये ठीक है कि नहीं है। कभी कभी वो हमें करेक्ट भी कर देते हैं कि आप ये वाला वर्ड यूज कीजिए, और हम उनकी भाषा में, और हमको ट्रांसलेशन में, जैसे कि हम अभी एक स्टूडेंट की स्टोरी हम कर रहे हैं लखनऊ से जो लिखी गई है, और हम हिंदी बोलते हैं पर हमारी हिंदी इतनी अच्छी नहीं है, तो अब हम हिंदी एडिटर, हमारे ट्रांसलेशन हिंदी एडिटर को हम वो कोड भेजेंगे और हम उनसे कहेंगे कि आप ये ट्रांसलेट करके हमें बताइए कि, क्योंकि इंग्लिश और हिंदी में लिखने में काफी फर्क है ना, यू कांट एग्जैक्ट ट्रांसलेशन। तो हमने उनको भेजा है, उनसे पूछा है कि आप बताइए इसका एग्जैक्ट ट्रांसलेशन क्या है, जैसे कि उड़िया में या तमिल में या जो भी स्टोरी हम कर रहे हैं, जैसे हम तो रिपोर्टर की तरह से कह रहे हैं आपको ये, और सब भूल जाइए। एज ए रिपोर्टर आई विल चेक विद द पर्सन ट्रांसलेटर ऑफ दैट लैंग्वेज कि हैव आई गॉट इट राइट और नॉट।
लेकिन
एंड
प्रॉब्लम
आल्सो विद
ये
द
हो रहा
पीपल,
है, प्रॉब्लम ये हो
सिर्फ
रहा है कि
ट्रांसलेशन
बड़े
का भी
बड़े
इशू।
रिसर्चर्स भी इसका शिकार हो रहे हैं। मैं
जी
लगातार एकेडमिया या आर्काइव्स ऑफ अमेरिका, इन तमाम जगहों पे जो कल्चर से रिलेटेड आर्टिकल हैं, मैं उनको देख रहा हूँ। और जब हम अपने यहाँ अपने कलाकारों से बात करते हैं तो उनकी पूरी बात बदली हुई दिखती है, उनका पूरा स्टोरी चेंज हुआ दिखता है। ये सवाल मेरा कंसर्न है बेसिकली, है जिस कंसर्न
जी
को हम
जी
लोग भी डील कर रहे हैं।
एक बहुत वैलिड कंसर्न है आपका, और ये मैं आपको कहना चाहूंगी कि जब हम खुद को आर्काइव कह रहे हैं तो ये जो हमारा गाइडलाइन है उसको बिना मानकर हम ये नहीं कर सकते। पहला बात तो ये है कि जो भी फील्ड में हम काम करते हैं और जो हमारा, जब हम अपना नैरेटिव बिल्ड करते हैं उस फील्ड नोट्स और फोटोग्राफ्स और वीडियो सब कुछ के साथ इंटरव्यूज, वो सारा जमा करना होता है हमको। पहला बात अपने एडिटोरियल टीम के पास, और जो हमारा ड्राफ्ट जो हम भेजते हैं उसमें जिस तरह से हम लिखते हैं, हमारे जो एडिटोरियल टीम है, अगर आपको मैं बताऊं कि वो जब वापस आता है हमारे पास, वो किसी बच्चों का जो एग्जाम का कॉपी होता है ना, जो मतलब पूरे तरह से को आपको दिखेगा कि वो ट्रैक चेंज मोड में वो इतना माइन्यूट डिटेल्स हमसे मांगा जाता है कि इनिशियली हम सोचते यार इसका क्या जरूरत है, देन इवेंचुअली जब हम और थोड़ा सा मैच्योर होते गए और फील्ड एक्टिविटीज हमारा बढ़ता गया, हम खुद भी समझने लगे, तब हम रियलाइज किए कि ये किस एथिकल जगह से ये चीज बनता है। ये एक बहुत बड़ा इंटीग्रिटी का बात है, ये एक जर्नलिस्टिक इंटीग्रिटी का बात है, हम इसके साथ कभी कॉम्प्रोमाइज नहीं कर सकते। तो कभी किसी का बयान हम बदल दे, ऐसा हो नहीं अभी तक हम, कम से कम अभी तक हमारे पारी में जो भी स्टोरीज आए हैं उसमें अभी तक ये कभी नहीं हुआ। ये सिर्फ ट्रांसलेशन का बात नहीं है, ट्रांसलेशन में तो बहुत टाइम में गैप बन सकता है, वो जितना ही कोशिश करिए एक गैप रह जाता है, उसको हम लोग मैक्सिमम पूरा करने का वो गैप को कोशिश करते हैं। लेकिन जो एथिकल जगह है वो बहुत बड़ा है, उसके बेसिस पे ही हम फील्ड पे जाकर एक स्टोरी के ऊपर काम करना शुरू करते हैं। इट बिगिंस इवन बिफोर द प्रोसेस ऑफ इंटरव्यूइंग दैट पर्सन। जो हमें हमारा जो जिस तरह से हम जब पिच करते हैं किसी स्टोरी को, तभी हमें कह दिया जाता है, थंब रूल है हमारा कि आपको ये फॉलो करना है, अदरवाइज ये स्टोरी आपका नहीं उभर कर आएगा। और कई सारे जितने स्टोरीज हमने लिखे हैं ना, उसके 4 गुना ज्यादा स्टोरीज हमारे खुद के रिजेक्ट हो चुके हैं सबके। तो ऐसा, और वो इसी बेसिस पे कि हमारे पास इनफ मटेरियल नहीं था, हम ठीक से वैलिडेट नहीं कर पा रहे थे। हो सकता था कि सिचुएशन को हम लोग उतना ट्रांसपेरेंटली एक्सप्रेस ना कर सके। हम लोग ऐसा मतलब इस तरह का सोच भी नहीं सकते कि एक जगह जो है उसको इतना अंधेरे में रखकर हम अपने हिसाब से किसी चीज को अपने बयान पे बदल कर रिप्रेजेंट करेंगे, ये नहीं हो सकता। पहला फर्स्ट हमारा।
और
खैर
एक
ये
दूसरी चीज,
आपके लिए नहीं था, आपके लिए नहीं था, मैं उन लोगों के बारे में कह रहा था जो फील्ड से स्टोरी भेजते हैं। जी प्रीति
मतलब
आप।
हाँ नहीं, एडिंग टू स्मिता, वन मोर थिंग। एक तो हमने सुना है कि पारी एडिटर्स जो हैं कभी कभी जूनियर रिपोर्टर से बोलते हैं कि सेंड अ फोटो ऑफ योर फील्ड नोट्स, बिकॉज आपने जो लिखा है ना, मुझे लग रहा है कि इसमें कुछ गलती होगी आपकी। तो हमें बताई थी एक एडिटर ने कि हमने उनसे बोला था कि सेंड मी अ फोटो ऑफ द फील्ड नोट्स और सेंड मी, आई वांट टू सी इट हाउ यू हैव रिटन इट, कि उसमें आपकी इंटरप्रिटेशन में कोई गलती हो या ना हो। ये एक है। और दूसरी चीज जो आप कह रहे थे ना कि फोक आर्ट कभी कभी कुछ बोलते हैं और कुछ गलत लिखा जाता है, और उनका व्हाटएवर री इंटरप्रिटेशन या अपने ही कुछ आइडिया डाल देते हैं उसमें। तो ये हम जैसे स्मिता कह रही थी ना जाने के पहले, तो हम सोचते हैं कि स्टोरी एक चीज है और हम चले जाते हैं फील्ड, पर वहां पहुंच के हमें पता चलता है कि दैट इज नॉट द स्टोरी दैट द पीपल ऑफ द कम्युनिटी वांट टू टेल अस. फॉर एग्जांपल, आई वेंट टू डू अ स्टोरी ऑन suicides which were increasing among young women in a certain area. जब हम वहां पहुंचे तो हमें पता चला कि दैट इज नॉट द मेन स्टोरी दैट पीपल इन द कम्युनिटी वांटेड मी टू टॉक अबाउट वाज द अल्कोहलिज्म. So I had to put aside my mental health story completely, and I had to do this because this is the story that the community wants to talk about. I can't go with my agenda and say कि नहीं मेरा ये agenda है, अब या हमें इसी पे बताइए. तो ये भी होता है पारी में कि हम सोचते हैं कि कुछ स्टोरी होगा, हम फील्ड में जाके बताएं कि कुछ और.
जी जी,
बोलिए
थैंक
आप,
यू,
बोलिए.
थैंक यू.
Anyone else
एक
would like? Yeah, please go ahead.
एक मैं सिर्फ स्टोरी ऐड कर रहा हूँ, अगर आप लोग करवा पाए. वंडरफुल स्टोरी. बिहार में एक जगह है पत्थरकट्टी. गौर ब्राह्मण्स ने वहां पे, चूंकि आप स्टोन की बात कर रही थी इसलिए मैं ये स्टोरी आपको बता रहा हूँ कि वो लोग स्टोन कार्वर्स हैं. कहा जाता है कि वो बंगाल से, जयपुर से पत्थरकट्टी आए थे अल्लाबाई होलकर के कहने पर. वो पूरी कम्युनिटी आज के डेट में वापस माइग्रेट कर गई है. 18th सेंचुरी में वो आते हैं बिहार, और अब पूरी कम्युनिटी एक तरीके से माइग्रेट कर गई है. सिर्फ 3 फैमिली बचे हैं, और उन 3 फैमिली के जो टोटल मेंबर्स हैं, दे आर इन नंबर अराउंड 80 और 85. तो जो गौर ब्राह्मण्स का पूरा ट्रेडिशन है वो बिहार से खत्म हो रहा है. आप लोग देख सकते हैं उस स्टोरी को. थैंक यू.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing.
थैंक यू.
Would anyone else like to ask any question? Maybe we take one last question because it's 6:41. Okay, then I will share this message that I had earlier received in chat from Charul, who shared that they drove 300 kilometers to reach home to be in the network zone and attend this session.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Charul, and thank you so much, Priti and Smita. This has been enlightening.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank
sure-
you for having us.
No, thank you. And
Thank you. And I want to say that, I'm sure the people are listening on this chat are people genuinely interested in archiving and documentation. So please reach out to us, Smita and me and Pari, and, we'd love to know if you have ideas for stories or documentation. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm sure everybody would love to reach out. And if it's all right, can I share this video on the Facebook page so that more people could have access to it?
Yeah, sure. I don't know.
Smita, is that all right?
Give
Thank
it.
you. Thank you so much. And we used to read about contact zones when we were taught about museums, where James Clifford says that museums can be that site where people and perspectives that otherwise don't come together ever can come together. And I just feel so overwhelmed. Thank you for making that come true. It's really beautiful how you've done that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Priti. Thank you, Smita. Thank you, everyone, for
Thank
being
you,
with us
Purnima.
today on Sunday. Have a good evening ahead. Take care of yourselves and stay connected with us. Thank you.
You too. Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.